Lama Jumden, the Jinsheva, Rajama Yana, Zobe Sanje, Rivana Shasun, the Varishavan Jidin, Jamba Jivund, Kalo Java Lama Meva Hada Benam Jid, Sanje Jumden, the Bejava Shajatu, Sase Lochedo Jaso Sheva Damba Jumden, the Jinsheva, Rajama Yana Vasu, Rivada Shasun, the Varishavan Jidin. Given the Vakalo Javala Meva Hada Benam Jid. Sanjay Jumden, the Bejava Shajatu Vala Shaz. Chöde Jazu Shava Dema Jumden, the Jinshavan Raju. Yanda Vanzo Sanjay Rivada Shazun. The Varishavan Jidin Jamba Given the Vakalo. Lana Meva Hada Benam Jedema Sanjay Jumden. Bejava Shajatu Vala Shaz and Chöde Jazu Shava. Kanzekanya Zowa Jadon Sajan Dema. One incident and not churches on the Zekaba Namda Gunga to Susan, Yijinja to Sejan. Chavan Jedens on the Nameba, Wombochonia Jona, Tension de Batim and Lavish, Sandon Dava Jona, the region of Seva Sumaji, Yame Jona, Wombo to Jichet and Bottom J. Jembeton of Sonamia Deja. The Jinshala Charles and Taben de Chateau giving it. Cheddar to the mature Yoga Shinjun on Charles and Trailer Driven. Lavatala Rabdone, Shingetama, the Gedon on your child. The Wachian Mission gave up as also Rangason. Tenasanja Dema Yagamara Vima, you must have Melon Loda Tenda when decision on the Delta Solom the Quantum Legend and the Gadan Nada Shiva. Sibezon and Jovan ratio.
The teacher, the blessed one God, full destroyer, completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, the knower of the world, supreme guide of aims to be taken, teacher of gods and humans, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the second by prostrating the offerings and hope for refuge. To the teacher, the blessed one, the one born hero, the full destroyer, completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sugata in all the world, supreme guide of aims to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the second plan, I prostrate, make offerings, and hope for refuge. To the teacher, the blessed one, the one gone beyond, the full destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sugata no Oracle, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to the completely and fully awakened. The blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the second plan, I prostrate, make offerings, and hope for refuge. When the supreme one humans, you are Lord and deserve, you outside strife and sin. I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise then I prostrate. With pure bodies formed supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, flame that blazes in the three worlds, winner of the best, to you I prostrate. With the supreme science, race like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. You are immaculate, with your robes and not, incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior in great compassion, teacher having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities of a vast ocean, to you the one gone to thusness I prostrate. The purity which makes one free from the attachment, the virtue which frees one from the lower rungs, the one path, sublime pure reality, to that thou knowledge pacifies I prostrate. Those who are liberated also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realization, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you the sublime humility and tending virtue I prostrate. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions. Perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. Star, mirage, a flame of lamp, an illusion of drop of dew or hollow, a dream of flash of lightning, cloud. See conditioned things as such. Through these merits, cessation means attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the foe of false, and be delivered from the ocean of suffering, aging sickness, and death.
Sanji Jono Zojo Jono no Chandrakirti Dane Jono Dagin Jeso Jebe Sonam Je Dola Penje Sanji Jono Sanji Jono Sojo Jono no Chandrakirti Dane Dagin Jeso Jebe Sonam Je Dola Penje Sanji Jono Sanji Jono Zojo Jono no Chandrakirti Dane Dagin Jeso Jebe Sonam Je Dola Penje Sanji Jono.
I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I quickly attain the state of Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I quickly attain the state of Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I quickly attain the state of Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Gede Bumba Dayano, Jadan Chibachin Dojoro, Gede Bumba Nambeji, Buddha Siniame, Dani Yuba Mayano, and Dagi Yuba, Dana Dagi Shivish, Zimeju, Mazimanya Zimega, Day Mazimanya Zimega, Kangatonga, Nanda Shiranya Dama, Dada Daginim Zana, Yohan, the Simple Javase, let on your Moseva Dara, let on your Tata Jovan, Tomani. 다고시 전도지 담에지 산전도 담에가 메시지 제브라샤반도 보데 심지주연도 베서 마제바도 춘이니면 되도 수 탐제 양다양다미 양다양도 마인이 양다미미 양도 텐데서 지지도 셴레시메시바도 저반도 좀 nom도 메도 타데메 텐데지 칼라데나 간조보 텐데르제 티니메 텐데 셴보 메이제 지지메도 산제 지령 그놈제 때마다 준교고 준지문이 타데메 쳬범 조선제도 마주제 니데노 데세반도 산지제 신데 때마다 나다시야 다바시야 셔본다로도 셔고 주제야 강기야 투빈이 좀더 따와도 셔고 베죠 고담은 될 차세로 Yeah, I think it's chapter 9, right? Identifying the object of negation. So object of negations, identifying the object of negations. So I think here they're trying to make a distinctions between Madhyamika, Savatantrika, and then Madhyamika, Swatantrika. So Swatantrika, in Hindi they call Savaraj, the Mahatma Gandhi started Savaraj from from Africa, and then he continuously worked on in India to deal with the British government. Savaraj. Savaraj means self-sufficient. so we are not the Gandhi's policies try not to rely on the British food, like salt, clothing. So, and he started making himself the clothing. So is the Savaraj. So here the Savatantrika means you know, Rangyus in Tibetan Rangyu, Tantrika, South Tantrika. So this school, Madhyamikas, believes that how much you try to negate the kind of, truly existing of the kind of phenomena. Always there's some kind of residue that intrinsic nature is there. So if you can totally negate any kind of, intrinsic nature of the phenomena, and then you will fall in analysis. So Savatantrika believes that, so for example, even the illusion-like phenomena, there's some degree of that is, falsely exist, not true, but like the Swatantrika believes that, for example, when you see the reflection of your face in the mirror, because of the mirror and the mirror having contact with the face is the conditions that is by nature gives you the reflections. So that reflection is intrinsic. The reflection being face is untrue. The existing of the reflection is the intrinsic, because it's by nature it is born. So the Savatantrika. So there's some degree of self-sufficiently existing. Savatantrika. So this is why Lama Tsongkapha said, identifying the object of negations.
So do they think the intrinsic existence is in the mirror or in the face?
Huh?
Where do they see the intrinsic existence?
The reflection itself is intrinsically exist, because it has to be born. There's no kind of choice. It has to be born when the cosmic conditions admit, right? When the cosmic conditions are, conducive, and then the effect has to be born. So that's why it is by nature, it has to be born. It is not conceptually projection.
And that's sort of, they think all causes and conditions have intrinsic.
Yes, yeah. Every cosmic conditions, every phenomenon that exists is intrinsically exist. Now everything is intrinsically exists in some degree, and then they out of deceptions, and people may see kind of over superimposition, like mirror, the reflection in the mirror as a face is the superimposition, right? An illusion like the illusion of elephant. Illusion itself is intrinsic. Becoming elephant and horse is a mistake, is the wrong. Right? So it kind of it suits the for ordinary thinking. We can say yes, this is maybe there's some level that we superimpose on a phenomena, and some degree that exists by nature. Right? There's something from object, and then you superimpose on things. So that is the object of negation that has to be negated.
How is this different from the mind only?
Yeah.
Huh?
How is it different from mind only?
Mind only school thinks that everything rises from the mind, nothing from the external. So everything that you see and smell and taste and feel or you imagine all rise from the mind.
So would the Tantrika think the quality of being able to reflect is intrinsic of the mirror, or just the face arising with the conditions is intrinsic?
There's no face arising from the mirror. There's the reflection arising from the mirror.
Would that be what they're considering intrinsic? That just the face arising, the reflection of the face in the mirror is intrinsic?
I think you have to make clear that face or the reflection of the face. Reflection of the face is intrinsic. Reflection of the face as a face is not intrinsic.
For Satantric.
Savatantrika. Yeah, Savatantrika, middle way. Yeah. So, and then the object of negation here is now this reflection of the face arises by depending, but depending upon face and the mirror. Right. So now, if the reflections, if someone thinks that reflection exists by itself without depending on face and the mirror, then that is the object of negations. Right. So, then the human, the person, table, tree, horse, cow, anything that exists, right, exists by itself without depending on thought, without depending on the perceptions, and that is the object of negations. So that's the negation element. It has to be negated. Right? So there's some commonness. There's some intrinsic nature for the object. So that intrinsic nature is also exist depending on many factors. So if something exists without depending on any other, that is the negation element. So this is why this Lama Tsongkapha is saying that identifying the object with negations. Now the Prasangika school says with face, right? With face or without face, the reflection of the face does not exist by itself. Right? With your body, with sun, the shadow of your body does not exist by itself, not moving by itself. Right? So with or without, there is nothing intrinsic nature in the phenomena. So Swatantrika, with body, the shadow exists intrinsically. Right? And also last time we read through this, how the fifth ground enters the sixth ground. He does so by means of 10 perfect equanimities with respect to the phenomena. What are these 10s? So these 10 here, and the Swatantrika and the Prasangika school, they use the same language, but their understanding is different. Right? So is a perfect equanimity of all phenomena in their absence of sign. So absence of sign, temameva means absence of sign means there's always indicator when things appears or things that you conceive or imagines, when object it began to appears with identity. So there's always the indicator that identity is by itself. Right. So here the absence of the sign means that there is no such, in the Prasangika school, there is no such indicator of the sign or that kind of, like any identity that exists by its own essence, means any entity that exists by its own, by itself. So I think that's, for example, we say, arising, the coming, the future, the coming of the futures. So the future of the coming. So when we conceive of the futures, and it seems that the coming of that activity of coming is done by the future itself. So if the future has the quality, right, to come by itself, so then there's no longer a future. It is already being initiated and it's already being produced because it can't go. Right? So and it cannot be future. It cannot be yet to come. And also, for example, the going. So the going has the when we think of going, again, I think generally people always think about when we die, we go to next life. So there's a going, the concept of going. Now, when we look at the seed in the sprout, the disintegrate. So when the seed is disintegrating, in the process of disintegrating, this whole disintegrating is kind of indicating the sprout is coming. Right? So the day is passing, and that indicates tomorrow is coming. Right? When the seed in the process of disintegrating, all this, disintegration of the seed indicates the coming of the sprout. So that the coming of the sprout is not apart from the disintegration of the seed. So in every part of the seed that has disintegrated and ceased to exist is no longer found to be a going. Right? There is no possible anything that has ceased to exist, disintegrated. Every part of that seed is not going forward. So when the seed has completely ceased, and that is the time the sprout has born. So the seed has to go again after being ceased. Right? So when the person died, so why that person has to go after having been died? Because when he died is the born. So when the milk has ceased to exist through the disintegrations, right? When the milk has totally ceased, at the time as yogurt has born. So why the milk to go kind of transfer to the state of yogurt after having been ceased? So they say now coming, going is conceptually the fabricated entity that you just made up in your mind. And that is the basis for the language to express. Today is going towards tomorrow. Tomorrow is coming towards today. So maybe there's a time that today and tomorrow meet together. so today is going tomorrow is coming today. So so otherwise, where he goes, right, when he comes. So this is whole played in your mind through the language and the concept. But so if you think that all these signs are, all these signs of coming and going are done by object by itself. So that is kind of, saying that these are the negation element, these are the untrue, unreal. So the perfect equanimity of all phenomena in their absence of signs means like that. There's a sign always when anything that appears, there's always sign of they being exist by themselves. Right. So the fifth ground, when it enters the sixth ground, so by perfecting this understanding or realization, nothing really exists by their own essence. And the perfect equanimity of all phenomena in their absence of the defining characteristics. So defining characteristics, like, by definition of instant changing, instant disintegrating, instant changing is the defining characteristic of impermanent. So again, when we say the definitions or the characteristic, so we think it seems to the mind, the characteristic is something independent from what it's referring to, the referred object. And this is like, the host in what do you call it? In the stage that people do this, one person that, oh, welcome, this person is coming here, and you.
Oh, they call the host or MC.
And there's sometimes ceremony. There's the one person who introduce and they're calling his name, and he comes.
No.
So
Yeah.
the doctor is coming now. He comes. So similar in every characteristic, it start defining. This like characteristic like host and calling. Yeah, here's impermanent. This is the product. It's like two independent entity, one that introduce the another. So characteristics, like from the characteristic, for example, impermanence of the table is the characteristic of the table. That kind of identifies the table as impermanent, right? And impermanence, instant changing of the table, defines the table is impermanent, and product of the table. So that defines the table being produced, right? And the functional of the table, that defines the table is a thing, right? So when you separate the characteristic and then the referral object, so it seems the two independent entities that the work of the characteristic is to introduce the kind of impermanent and the product and the thing. So this, so the nature of the characteristics appears to the mind as being separate or independent from their defined phenomena, defined what you call, referral object, right? And so here's saying there is no such thing as a characteristic that's being independent from their referral object. There's no instant changing that is being independent from impermanent. There is no characteristic such as a product that defines the the, produced the phenomena. So then a crime, the characteristic of crimes defines the person as a criminal, right? So the crime and the criminal, it seems the kind of two separate, different things. And then the characteristic job is to identify the criminal. So the consciousness really kind of perceived that way. The characteristic in the referral objects are different, but
From one we make two.
Huh?
One we make two. If we separate profit production from the act of producing.
Yeah.
I make two.
So I think this is so even if we imagine me and my hand, me and my head, me and my body, me and my thought. So there's always, it appears to the mind two different things. This is like me in my suitcase, and me in my car, and a cow's owner in a cow, right? So, so for the consciousness, for the conceptual, it always kind of appears to two different things. So in the reality, by nature, there is no your hand is no different from yourself. Your thought is no different from yourself, and the instant changing is no different from the impermanent. So the equanimity of all phenomena, the absence of defining characteristics. So, so the fifth ground of the Bodhisattvas, when he enters the sixth ground, and he finds the equanimity of the referral objects, and what is the referral object and the reference are no two different phenomena. So in their absence of birth, and here the word that they use, birth. So it's like more like arising, absence of arisings. Absence of arising means the future. Their future is not arising or coming to be born by itself. Right? Future of the sprout is not by itself coming to be born, because future of the sprout has no sprout. And when there is no sprout, and so there is no sprout to come, because the future of the sprout is unborn sprout. So unborn sprout is not sprout. So my future Buddha. So when it's my future Buddha, is it Buddha or not Buddha? If it is Buddha, it's already enlightened. So it's already enlightened. There is no point for me to kind of to practice or study, right? So because my futures already exist. Right? So the future sprout is not coming by itself. So that's why it's absence of birth. And being born, so their absence of being born, being unborn, right? Majeva, unborn. Now, when you see things, the origin of the sprout, things that is already manifest, it is not born from, means it's not born from, it's not coming from the state of the cause. Because it was not there in the state of cause. To come from there, it has to be there. Right? So the language has tricked us. So it always says, yeah, this sprout is coming from this. So then almost we imagine like this person is coming from this cave. So he was there, now he is coming out. Right? So if every effect is pre-exists within their cause, so then every future is already exists with their cause. And then, yeah, if every future is already exists within the cause, and then there is a kind of, there is no way you can say this may takes longer to give rise to the effect. This may give rise to the effect much faster. Because the fast and the long is not possible, because the effect, the future is already exist within the cause. So yes, unborn, being unborn means like that, right? Kyeba means reasons. What has reasons? That very thing that already arisen is not coming from the state of cause, not from the past. So I think, yeah, I think because the language we have so much deceit by the language, when we think, oh, my previous life and my next life. So you think, oh, I was there in my previous life, right? So I was there. Who is me? What is the human being or non-human? So when you as a human being was there in the previous life as elephant, so then is that human being riding on the elephant or inside the elephant? Right. So if you are not there, so what makes you believe that the very human being is from the previous life? So I think this has so much, this conceptually projections, and you are, clinging too much on the conceptual and the projections. So because of that, many of the school of thought and the religions that believe people go to the next life or heaven, right? Next life to the heaven after that person has died. So if he don't go, he won't reach there. So now the question is he died or he is not died? Because he's going. If he died, how can he go? Right? After having been died, broken, seized, and so how can that has the activities? How can that have a function to go? So when you see when the yogurt, when the milk has transformed, when the milk transformed to the yogurt, have you ever seen the milk after being seized and it's going to become the yogurt? And have you seen the Friday ever go after the Friday kind of midnight, after 12 o'clock midnight, and Friday goes, I have to go to Saturday. So otherwise there won't be any Saturday. Right? So the Prasangika school said, death birth is like a two sides of the scale. When one goes down, simultaneously the other comes up. So if you understand that kind of, the the impermanence nature of the, impermanent nature means impermanent is based with disintegration and arising, right? If you understand that, you don't have to make, you don't have to think or believe and there's an atma or there's a soul which has to go. So I think there's a lot of, the end up in the great consequences. So if things go after having been seized, and what has born and has to come from or produced by uncaused, because the death and the birth between there's a big gap, right? If the death and the birth has a big gap, so in every birth should be born or arisen without cause. So that's the so being unborn means that this fifth ground, the Bodhisattva's interest, the sixth ground, through the knowledge of this things, anything that has a reason being produced is not coming from the state of their cause and not coming from their past, right? So I think in the Buddha Palita, this is when we think about the three times, that time is not, some people think time is one single entity that comes from the past and to the present, and up after the present, and that single entity goes to the future, right? So, and if that single entity, it was there in the past and moved to the present, again moved to the future, so that is no longer a time. It is not impermanent. It is the permanent nature because it never changed. It's only like, so it's just changing the location. If the time is single entity, right? So being unborn, being void, Wembas. So these are same meaning. This being void, and sometimes the even the Buddha Shakyamuni in the sutra, this says that very nature of the phenomena is like it never moves, it never changes, like a mountain never moves, and that the nature is the absence of intrinsic nature. Nothing intrinsically exists. So that very nature is revealed and experienced and by the previous Buddha and the present Buddha and the future Buddha also kind of reveals that, and that he will teach on that. So that everything is kind of being void of the intrinsic nature. I think this is also implying that the very nature of the reality is absence of intrinsic nature. By itself, every phenomena, every entity by itself, not identified as an object, right? So when you start to seeing things are changing, things are moving, things are kind of, disintegrating, things are improving and decreasing, those things are conceptually projected, fabricated entity, right? This is what you are seeing. So being void in there, and it comes to the last here, the number 8, in their primordial purity, so that the absence of the intrinsic nature is not just happened after Buddha has taught emptiness. The emptiness or the absence of intrinsic nature is before the Buddha, or during the Buddha, after the Buddha. It never changes. Right? So the Buddha gained Buddha obtained, right? The omniscient through realization of the phenomena as it is. Right? So this is what we call the Tathagat, in English, thus gone, or Tathagat. So Tatha is the as it is. Gat means being or gone. Right? He gone by knowing the reality as it is. So it's pretty much telling that Buddha is attained enlightenment, right? Saying that not by recitations, not by meditation or work, chanting rituals. Buddha obtained enlightenment through understanding the reality as it is. So I think I mentioned that before, yeah. So there's a conversation with Shariputra and Ananda, maybe, yeah. And they all call the Buddha Shakyamuni most of the time Tathagat. So the Ananda asked Shariputra, what does that mean, Tathagat? So, and Shariputra says, in one aspect, when we describe the Tathagat, it seems Tatha means everything arises from the nature, everything's dissolved back to the natures. In that case, in that regard, you can understand everything is Tathagat. Right? Now, why we call the Tathagat to the Buddha means Buddha's the mind is totally settled and absorbed, inseparable with reality as it is. This is why we call the Buddha the Tathagat. Right? So there is no any kind of mistaken or the omniscient have no any defects or no any mistake, no any wrong appearance, mistaken appearance. So totally inseparable with the reality as it is. So this is why, and best to call him the Tathagat. Gati is the Tathagat. Gat is the gone. Right? Tatha is the as it is. The one who has gone and never coming back will become inseparable with as it is. So that, nature of the reality is in the primordial purity. In their freedom of elaborations, the very nature of the phenomena, and when you reveals the ultimate nature of the phenomena, and you and there is no proliferations. There is no mental projections. The freedom from elaborations. The perfect equanimity in their absence of affirmation and rejections. So when you understand the reality as it is, and there is nothing that you can, you can see or you can imagine that something need to be abandoned, that something need to be adapted. Because if your mind is knowing the reality as it is, and there's no wrongdoing or right doings, because your mind is totally, with the reality as it is, and there is no your actions with wrong, your action is positive.
So, in the sense of conceptual right and wrong, is that oriented to saying, oh, this is right because it lets you see reality as it is? And so like the perfections, they're perfect because they are tied with like emptiness and they're not like diluted. So is that like when we say right and wrong, it's because, oh, well, that helps you see reality as it is, whereas the other one adds to ignorance.
Yeah, it seems like right and wrong is taught to the people who have both. So they have both habit. They have an interest in doing right things, but they have a habit to doing bad things. So because your nature, so your nature of the mind is not really fixed with one thing. So you need someone to tell you, well, this is the good, not good for you. This is the good for you. And then this is like, the patient has no idea, no knowledge of his illness. And then only he asks the doctor says, you shouldn't be eating this, you shouldn't be doing this, right? And you should always do this. So you follow, because the patient is ignorant. So he has to guide every step, right, by the doctors and nurses. So now this is what I'm saying is, if your mind is totally settled with the reality as it is, and you have no knowledge of right or wrong, there's no such action that you think I need to abandon.
Abandon once you crossed over.
Yeah, once you're crossed, then you don't have anything to gain knowledge, to study more, to put effort to knowing something. Because every step of every event of the mind is always kind of with reality as it is. So your activity with that knowledge of the reality as it is your discipline, is your this is how people see as right actions, right? So and the Vinaya text, the monks, the fully ordained monks, we have 253, and they kind of vows, right? Disciplined. So these, according to what had one day is Buddha's the whole day Buddha's actions, right? So Buddha has no violations or no any infractions of this 253. So he's totally pure. So then the follower of the Buddha try to be like him. So we kind of, Buddha says, now we think that, oh, this is good for us, right? So we should try, kind of imitate him, right? Right now we are imitating as our obligation, so out of fear, so we just follow that, right? When you attain the enlightenment, you're free from all the stain of afflictive emotions, you don't have to imitate, you don't have to try to be someone or something. right now we need to do something like I have to so these are the right and the wrong, good or bad. These are all taught the people who has totally unknown or people has a very little bit kind of understanding right and wrong. So they're most likely to do the wrong thing. So for those, yes, there's right doing and the wrong doing. Virtues and non-virtues. So when you, in the state of enlightenment, there is nothing to think that, oh, this is the virtuous activity, this is non-virtuous activities. So affirmations and the rejections. So this is like in Tibetan, langtur, langba means you accept, you adapt it, because you think this is the good for you, right? So and the rejections means, and then so you have some kind of information or some kind of a sense of knowing this may cause the suffering in the future. I shouldn't be doing this, right? So the fifth ground of the Bodhisattva, when he enters the sixth ground, he has a perfectly understood or perfected the wisdom that understands the affirmations and the rejections are, conceptually. There is no by itself as the virtuous actions. There's no action by itself. There's a non-virtuous actions. The perfect equanimity of all phenomena in there resembles to illusions. So when the conventional realities, right, right or wrong, or favorable, unfavorable, tall, short, right, and the small, and then like tactilities that kind of heavy and light, and heat and colds. These are and smell, taste, the tactilities, the colors. So all these conventional realities are kind of they don't have any essence by themselves. They are kind of the they exist. They exist through the projections. They exist through the many. How's that? Yeah, by dependently, they exist relatively existing. They don't really, there is no there is no color that exists by itself, because the color existing the colors is relatively depending on eye sense power, space, and light, and the form that hit the light, right? All together, they create the color. So that means that there is no color that could be located in the form, located in the space, located in the light, located in the eye sense power. Right? It's not privately located somewhere. It just have like a rainbow. Right? So in similar, the taste, the tactility is like that. Right? So every conventional reality, they're kind of exactly their existing is like a reflection of the face in the mirror. So perfect equilibrium of all phenomena resembles two illusions, right? The illusion-like phenomena, and to dreams, to mirage, to echoes, to reflection on the moon and the water, to mirror image, and to conjurations. So, and to, this thing. These are the different example, but the same meaning. Dream-like phenomena, it exists, but there is no true. There is no, how is that? And mirage-like phenomena, echo-like phenomena, a reflection on the moon and the waters, and a mirror image, and the conjurations. Conjuration, right? The perfect equilibrium of all phenomena in their absence of duality of real and unreal. So here the word they use, the real and unreal. In the Tibetan, right? Perfect equilibrium of all phenomena in their absence of duality of real and unreal, thing or non-thing, or entity or non-entity. So it's like here the real and unreal equanimity, the duality within the like, for example, the reflection of the mirror image, or the mirror image, because it has a function, it functions, right? There's a functions because it by looking at the mirror image, you can like touch it on your face, right? You can see what is in your face. So that means the mirror image has the function. Now the mirror image is, it also looks like, it seems like it's substantial phenomena. So that is not real. So the mirror image is, from the function, it is the real. And from their own essence, it is not real. Right? So the image, there is the function, there is the motions, and with the image you can kind of fix things. But the image itself is imitating yourself. Right? So it's so nyambanyi said the equanimities, yeah, because it has the motion, it has a functions, right? So because it has a function does not mean that thing as a substantially exist. Yeah. So this fifth ground, the Bodhisattva enters, when he enters the sixth ground, means, another word, this fifth ground, Bodhisattvas, when he, and his process of perfecting his wisdoms through the equanimity of absence of all signs, absence of all defining characteristics, absence of birth, absence of unborn. So this whole understanding perfectly and completely and totally, and with that, they're perfecting their wisdom. Then they interest the sixth ground. So the perfecting of the equanimity of all phenomena in the absence of duality in the real and unreal. And sometimes the real become, with deceptive mind, it's real, right? So with deceptive mind, it's real. With the kind of with the eye of the noble eye, with noble eye, it is unreal. So the reflection of the the mirror image is real to kind of deceptive eye consciousness. It's a deceptive mind. So right. So deceptive mind, the mirror image is real, and for the noble wisdom, kind of from the point of view of the noble wisdom, it is unreal. Yeah, it's like and the magicians when he create things. So the audience was spectator, right? So when people enjoying the entertainment of the magician play, for them, yes, it has a function, it is real to them. And for the magician himself, all these magician illusions, for him, yes, it appears real, but he, in his mind, he thinks this is not real. Right? The magician and the audience, right? The audience, for audience, it is the real. Right? For the magician himself, it is not real. So in this way, the conventional reality is the real, and it is the true for the deceptive mind. It is unreal, untrue for the wisdom that understands reality as it is. So when he realized the nature of all phenomena in such terms, because of his sharp and opposite, right? Forbearance. Opposite forbearance means no one. Opposite. What does that mean? Opposite.
That looks like a different story.
Just to be patient with the Dharma, to stay with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Or did you mean opposite?
Patient.
Opposite.
APP.
Yeah.
I've never seen that spelling.
Highly
Appropriate.
Oh, highly appropriate.
노신 제수 틈에 chanjusime sachugo just highly appropriate.
appropriate or highly pertinent. Appropriate.
노신 제수 틈에 세베스.
Restraint, tolerance, patience, self-control.
Anyway, so beauty of the because of his sharp and opposite, the forbearance, he will attain the sixth ground. Sharp means by perfecting his wisdoms, and sharp and highly appropriate forbearance. Now, means now he's still kind of this very sharp wisdoms is not going to knock him down. So he will just kind of stand with this wisdom, right? Some people is you see when they you see it's the this is like for example the container and the things that in the container. Some containers could not really hold the things that put in. And some containers, whatever they put in, they were just very firm. So it's similar in even the ordinary people. So when some people, when they kind of, when they understand intellectually some kind of, unique and they couldn't really stand for that. So they kind of sometimes, so arrogant or so kind of, show off, right? And they were very short time. And some kind of, whatever they gain knowledge, whatever kind of the, how's that? They're always hungry. So they absorb anything, digest everything. So this is like the fifth ground is not really hyper. So he go and he bear with this wisdoms, and then everything's the really kind of perfectly digest, and then he enters the sixth ground. I think this is you can in the normal how's that, normal people, this is happening everywhere, right? Sometimes some people could not really how's that, stand with their intellectual understanding, and some people they could not really how's that, bear with their wealth that make them very hyper to buy things. Yeah, the quality or the beautiness. It's all there. Some people is very kind of, it's unbearable for them what they have. So, and sometimes we use the first ground. The first ground, the path of seeing, is also the first wisdom. The direct perception is also called forbearance, because this kind of emptiness, direct experience, he had never experienced in his, in the ordinary, how's the ordinary path, in the ordinary life. So this is the first time he was directly perceiving the emptiness. So he still have this kind of, forbearance. So this is why, namely the manifest. This is why the sixth ground called manifest. So by perfecting his wisdom and the manifest or erasing the sixth ground. So they, when they each, the previous ground, when interest to the, and so like first ground interest to the second ground interest to the third grounds, all through the meditations, through through the meditative equipoise, they kind of moves the from the low ground to the high ground, right? So I think that pretty much explained that the first ground to the second ground through the meditative equipoise, the second ground to the third ground also through the meditative equipoise, which means mainly their paths are driven by the wisdom, right? So every state of the path is always lead up by the kind of the wisdom, perfection of the wisdom. So even the the virtuous activities or disciplines or monastic disciplines or the lay discipline or the Bodhisattva's discipline, whatever the discipline, and as long as the disciplines that is not associated with wisdom, the discipline that you hold through the obligations or out of fear, right? So if I break this vow, I may go lower realms. Now, when you develop the wisdoms, then it is not out of fear or obligations. The wisdom that kind of, that mixed your mind with this discipline. It makes all the discipline with the nature of the mind. So the wisdom is the one that perfecting the discipline. Wisdom is the one that perfecting your generosity and patience, concentrations. So the driven cause, right? Driven cause, or the every six the six perfections are the wisdom to understand the emptiness. And then you may think that, if the wisdom is doing all these things, and why the arhats they haven't been perfecting in generosity and patience and moralities. So the Hinayana arhats, they don't have the six perfections, but they have a perfect wisdom. So what happened to them, right? If the Mahayana is the Mahayana, the perfection of their quality is perfected by the wisdom, right? And then this wisdom is equally, right, practiced and the experienced by the Hinayana, right? So and why the Hinayana practitioners, have not perfecting the six perfections. So which means you have to have something to perfect, right? From the beginning, you don't have. So you have the only perfections, but you are not. You have nothing to perfect. You have a shoe polish, but you don't have shoes. So where do you want to polish it? So this Bodhisattvas, from the beginnings, their desire is, right, they sees benefiting yourself is starting from benefiting others. So the Bodhisattvas, my main, what do you call to way to protect yourself, to way to cherish yourself is start from the cherishing benefiting others. So the Bodhisattva sees the different way of finding the pursuing the happiness. Right? So they think the benefiting others, or the finding the skill to overcome the suffering of others is right. So the skill is improved and increases by depending on other people's, and at the same time, every skill of that is benefiting to individual. So like good chef. So when you start working in the restaurant, and like when you're the 3-star and 5 stars, more he works and more he's become skillful, and more he has high salaries. Right? So, but this is what this is. This is the way to benefit yourself. This is the way to cherishing yourself. Right? So the Hinayana from the beginning there, this is, I don't want suffering. I'm afraid of suffering. I want everything I do is to prevent suffering, to abandon suffering, to free myself from the suffering. So their whole idea, that their happiness is just peace, peaceful suffering, peaceful suffering. So Bodhisattva, the suffering is to understand, not abandon. From the suffering, there is a compassion. From the suffering, there are confessions. From the suffering, there is, love. From the suffering, there's the generosities. From the suffering, there's the patience. From the suffering, there's knowledge. The suffering is to understand, not to abandon. So I think because of this, their desire and their intentions, their kind of the different way of the different way of cherishing yourself. They see different ways. Totally different ways. So because of that, from the beginning, they have more compassion, more moral discipline, more patience, more concentrations. And additional that wisdom that understands emptiness. Now this has something to polish, right? To perfect. Right? So so the Bodhisattvas, without wisdom realizing emptiness, and that Bodhisattvas cannot reach, like even the path of accumulation to the path of preparations, without the wisdom realizing emptiness, they cannot, move forward. Right? And without the wisdom realizing emptiness, Bodhisattvas always tend to spoil themselves at the end. So they think sometime from the beginning they are very very cherishing, very loving, very responsible, and because of lack of wisdom realizing emptiness, and this kind of sneakily they always look for the reward and the respect. So then they kind of end up spoiling them. So they always, they always listen for the people what they, how they're talking about me. Is more people respecting me, or more people talking about me? So Chandrakirti in the commentary is also kind of stated that without wisdom realizing the emptiness, if someone claim they are bodhisattvas, this may kind of lead to deceiving oneself and many others. So likewise, the indicates that the phrase, the perfect equanimity of all phenomena must be extended up to, in their absence of affirmations and rejections. These two, the absence of affirmation and rejections, are a single perfect equanimity. It's a langja torjas. So is it kind of, I'm not sure, this is the exact kind of, the term that can be used, like, langja means, in English, maybe it's like the virtuous actions, non-virtuous actions, or appropriate actions, inappropriate actions, right? So like that. So this is the one single, I was saying. So affirmations and rejections like that. The appropriate actions and inappropriate actions. These two, the absence of affirmation and rejection, single perfect equanimity. The equanimity is in terms of phenomena, resemblance to the seven similes, such as illusions, should be taken as one perfect equanimity. So these whole, illusions, dream, mirage, echo, and the conjurations, these are count as one, right? And the last two, real and unreal. So equanimity, the absence of duality of the real and unreal, should also be considered as a single perfect equanimity. That's the one thing, one equanimity. There seems to be some variance in the identity of the 10 perfect equanimities, even between the commentary of the 10 ground sutra and the Bodhisattva's ground, since those two texts differ in their interpretations of the emptiness. From these traditions, the 10 perfect equanimities are here explained in manner distinct from them. Of these 10 perfect equanimities, the first is that all phenomena equal insofar all these appearance of the diverse signs do not exist from the perspective of the Arya meditative equipoise. So as I mentioned, I says the function of the cause and effect, the relation of the cause and effect, it is the rail to the deceptive mind, right? From the noble wisdom, from the noble I, it is unreal. So the real and unreal is determined by the different perspective. So the second is the equanimity of the defining characteristic. So second is the equanimity of all phenomena insofar as they are all devoid of existence by virtue of their intrinsic characteristics. The equanimity of absence in defining characteristics. So these two represent the general presentations. The meaning eight, remaining eight present particular as a variation of the very truth thus explained in general. For instance, the absence of birth is from the perspective of future, as I mentioned. Unborn is from the another temporal standpoint and reasons. Something already being produced, something in the process of going to be born. So right. That all phenomena are economists, right? Of equal must be understood in the context of other as well, being void referred to the void of what is to be born, what is already born. So that means there is no intrinsic nature in to be born. There is no intrinsic nature in things that already been born or produced. So both has no intrinsic, right? So this is already born. So these, in turn, must be understood in the sense of being absence of existence qualified by intrinsic characteristics, as stated in the context of the second perfect equanimities. So defining absence of defining characteristics. So this fact too of being devoid of existence through the intrinsic characteristic is not something constructed by the scripture or reasons. Rather, they remain so as primordial, pure. So being devoid, being void is not just emptiness, is not created by the Buddha or created by the Nagarjuna's texts, right? So it's a primordial, right from the beginnings. Everything that starts with the absence of intrinsic existence, the seven absence of dualistic elaborations. So I think elaboration here, the dualist elaborations means the so this is like mental projections or the so the proliferations and of they constructed through the language and the concept. So should be correlate to the first equanimities, the absence equanimity in the absence of science. Right? So while the freedom of elaborations of the language and conceptualizations should be correlated to the second equanimities, the freedom of elaborations, and this is also like pacification of the mental construct. The pacification of the mental constructs is so pacification of mental construct. So what are those mental constructs? What is the mental constructs? Means elaboration of the language and the conceptualization should be correlated with the second equanimities. So the elaborations, the devoid of elaborations or elaboration means is the mental construct that's projected and created through the language and conceptualizations. So, what language and thought by conceptualizing and the constructing the mental projections, and then said these are the characteristics. Right? So conceptual and language construct the characteristics. Right? So those characteristics is they don't really exist by their own essence. They don't define by themselves. Right? They don't define, for example, the instant changing, the characteristic, the instant changing is not by itself defining the impermanence. Right? So, like APP apples, the sound of that, right, is not the letter by themselves referring the apple to eat. It's your thought, right? Your thought construct the meaning. If there is the APPLE, which means the apple to eat, so conceptually imposing the meaning with that particular kind of letters, right? Like I think the very obvious, the like minute and the minute, the same spelling, right? So when it comes to explaining the particles, and then it's talking about the minute, you have to read it minute particles. And then if you when it comes to talking about the time, it is the minute. Right. So who is making that? The same spanning and the different meaning. If the letter is determining the meaning, and then it cannot be two meaning. There cannot be two meaning. So the meaning is imposes or constructed by the thought with particular letters. Now, if the thought construct the meaning APPLE with D or G, so then is the problems with the you don't know the language, right? So this is like, this whole elaborations and the characteristics are the conceptualized, through the conceptualizations, they exist within the mental projections. They don't really exist beyond the mental projections, and they don't really define things by themselves.
It feels like this elaboration is more close to the absence of sign than characteristic.
Yeah, as all these signs are the what is that sign? That's each sign they say is like, for example, when I say, there's a seal. So it there is a sign of the defining characteristic of the seers is act of seeing. So when you have, when you think of cow's honor, and that there is the cow. So that really characterizing, he is the cow owner, right? So it's both at the same time. So yeah, this usually when you say product, so this one, the word itself explicitly saying what has been produced, but it also kind of, the implicitly create the image, what has caused, right? So when you say what has born, and you also think there is automatically comes to the mind where he born from, what is that cause, what produced that, right? So this is whole play by the thought conceptualizations, through the conceptualizations. So if you touch on one mental construct, it opens lead to another mental construct, right? Because the mental construct, by creating one mental construct, and that that lead to open another mental construct. So to each of the mental constructs, if you bring our mind closer and closer and objectively look at, it will shy away. They don't really exist. Right? So from the distance, from not too close to the meaning, and then you say, there's this varieties, right? You say, product, impermanent, functional things. I have already said three. So each has a different meaning, different spelling. So if I go with that, so I want product, not impermanence. So can you have, without impermanence, have anything as a product? The product without impermanence is impossible, right? Product without functional is also impossible. But in verbally, you can say impermanence, and then you heard impermanent that didn't say about the product, right? When you heard the functional things, you have heard the functional, but you haven't heard disintegration, impermanent. So this is how the language has, create things. And then once the language has, create and project and fabricate, and then your mind, right? Your mind rather try to see the essence of it. We always look at the what has meant conceptually projected. So we cling on those mental projections. We try not to see it beyond that. So if you see beyond, term the impermanence, the product, and the functional things, if you go beyond that three letters, three terms, and you find one, it's all referring to the one thing. Because there is no product without being impermanent. There is no impermanence without being product. There is no product without being functional. So in similar, so so in the Heart Sutras, Tathayata, Gati Gati, Paragati, Parasamgati, Vidya source. There is someone, a follower of the Bodhisattvas, a Bodhisattva, who, by following his teaching, they go, right? Go from the path of accumulations, the second go to the path of preparations, and path of preparations to the path of seeings, and then path of meditations, the path of noble learnings. So when you heard that, and you have imagined that there is, right, the very path of equipoise, the person is now, right, he is moving, right, towards the path of preparations. The path of preparation is moving towards the path of seeing. So which means that, this, today is the Sunday. So when it's a Sunday, after that Sunday goes to the Monday, Mondays to the Tuesday. Now, this very Sunday has to go to the Monday. So no Monday has seen Sunday. so why Sunday continues goes to the Monday? So he has never reached there, but he keep going there. Right? So the Gati Gati Paragati is the linguistically, yes, there is, sequence order. There is, it seems there's one entity that travels from the one path to the another path, and then move forward to the path of seeing, to the path of meditations and enlightenment. So from the language, yes, this is how we see the picture, but beyond that picture, right, this is like, the one day, every hours of the day is one passing and passing, 1 hour that has passed, never coming back, never going, right? Every hour is not going forward. Every minute is not going forward. Every second is not going forward. Because of keep disintegrating of every hours of the day, that indicates, constantly indicating in your mind that next day is coming. So because of you have the imagining, or you have expected, because this is continuously disintegrating, therefore the next day is coming. Right? So when you create the image of coming of this Monday, and that image reflected in your mind, say, now Sunday is going. Right? So other than that, every hours of the Sunday is not going everywhere, not going at all. It just keeps disintegrating, disappearing. So everything that is ceased to exist, if that is going, what do you mean by disintegrate and cease to exist and exhaust? I think this kind of, so this really kind of, there's a lot of three-dimensional projections. There's many possible of being confused with language and with reality. So I think that's why sometimes, right, if you follow us religiously, and there is no there is no final destinations, because you are totally relying on the language and concept. So the concept, this is like concept in the language. This is like illusion-like phenomena. You're just constantly cycling in illusion. Like you are just walking in the dense fog. So continuously, where you have no idea where to go and where, right? Yeah. So religious is good, but so you have to know what this religious is teaching. When you learn from the teachers, if you just kind of too attracted with his handwriting and his expression, so you don't get the meaning what he's teaching. So they're similar, they're too much attached to the language and the concept. So yeah. The certain absence of dualistic elaboration should be correlated with conceptualization should be correlated with the second equanimity. The same second equanimity statement should be applied to the 8 as well. 9 consists of the numerous analogies that help ascertain the truth as explained above. The 10 refer to the fact that whatever the phenomena, all are the same in the lacking intrinsic existence in terms of the dualistic real and unreal. The sharp refer to the swift intelligence, while as the opposite right, refers to the forbearance towards the unborn nature, as a commensurate with that of the 8th ground. So this is like a Jesuit similar, right? As a similar. This 6th ground, the Bodhisattvas, the quality of his wisdom, and he sees very similar to what 8th ground is seeing. So 8th ground is directly seeing end of affective emotions. 8th ground is seeing or experiencing the cessation of affective emotions, almost like this 6th ground is very similar. He sees the total cessation of affective emotions. So there appears to be various types of the opposite forbearance, depending upon the context. Although many scriptures that teaches the suchness of the phenomena, the context here is the explanation how the wisdom of the 6th ground realized suchness. Thus, the citation here is from the scriptures that stated how the Bodhisattvas interest the 6th ground by means of 10 perfect equanimities. So this is why they say, this the realization of emptiness is, the emptiness is, it reveals the reality through analyzing on one single entity, and that opens the absence of intrinsic nature of all phenomena. So that by seeing one, seeing all, like that. Circle 6 ground suchness, the citation from here is the means of the perfect equanimities, identifying the force opposing the understanding of the suchness. Opposing, right? Force, identifying the force opposing the understanding of the suchness.
That opposite.
Not opposite, it's opposite. So which means identifying the negation of element. So what is negating here, right? So yeah, in setting forth all phenomena devoid of true existence, if one does not understand well what constitutes the true existence and what constitutes the grasping at true existence, one's view of the emptiness will certainly go, how's that, astray, right?
Astray.
Yeah. So here's the guide to the Bodhisattva's way states, without touching up on imputed entity, the absence of its reality cannot be grasped. So here the important thing is to understand the emptiness, and you should first understand imputational factors. You should understand how these mental projections being projected, right? Without knowing or understanding the clear understanding of how the mental construct that exists through the conceptualizations, and there's no way you can understand emptiness, which means you may interpret emptiness like emptiness of the table, like empty of the table. No table is emptiness of the table, right? So non-existent for me is my emptiness. This is how you interpret it. So without understanding of the mental construct, how the mental concept being exists through through the conceptualizations. I think all these teachings lead to pointing at one thing. This is the cause of the suffering is not knowing the object that you're talking about, you are desire about. So not knowing what the object is the cause of suffering. So for example, when you have difficulty with the relation with someone or something, right? That difficulties comes from not understanding how that person is acting, what caused by you. That's right. So it's not like a big obstacles or some spirit problems, some of the weathers, no, because not knowing the reality of yourself and other, and you have fun, yeah. So we all have suffering because of our not knowing the reality as it is. It's not caused just by the karma, not just caused by the punishment of the God. It's all your mind. Yeah, any questions?
We're talking about imputed entity.
Huh?
Imputed entity, that David David. The most important one is when we relate it to ourselves, the I. Is that correct?
imputed entity.
If you are putting the eye
Yeah.
or
Imputed entity is, imputed entity is like, for example, uh, when you s- when you see the present. So, because of the understanding of the present conditions, and you project that something may happen, right? For example, when you look at the potential within the seed, and then because of the understanding of the potential of the seed, and you impute it, this sprout may come. So the coming of the sprout is imputed entity, right? So now this imputed entity of the futures, that's we name the future, and so if you think that there is such thing as a future, and it stands by itself, that is superimposing on the imputed entity. And then the relation of the cause and effect is imputed entity. Barley seed, the barley sprout, the relation of barley seed and sprout. So is imputed entity. If you think the barley seed has the relation with the barley sprout before the barley sprout or after the barley sprout, both are exaggerations. The relation is the imputed entity, it is the reality, right? But the relation that being happen or being exist without sprout or with sprout, both are the superimposition. So the coming, going, identical, different, and many, one, these are all imputed entity.
so the number 2 equanimity talked about seeing one entity as two, right? Is that many and impermanence and the meaning as being separate from each other?
Yeah,
Is that
like a forest as a singular, and that forest, the singularity, has many trees as a plural. So these are all, conceptually kind of, conceptually it is separating as a forest as a singular, and trees are plural. So now this many trees which are plural can be sometime, right, include in that single entity as a forest. Sometimes the single entity as a forest, singularity, can pervade on all trees like umbrella, right? So these are all kind of conceived by the thought. This just if when you see that kind of things, you are just simply seeing in the mental projections. Right? If something that has happened beyond the mental projections, so there is a forest is something cover up on the trees, and trees just holding that a forest, right? And you can physically move a forest from the tree, right? And you can just move the forest to the another locations, cut all the trees, and bring this forest back to the locations, right? So as the separations is conceived, it appears within the conception. So I think the one way of the kind of, the freedom from the misconceptions is the freedom from the misconception is to understand the reality, right? When you understand the reality as they are, right? And then reality, the conventional reality, will stop deceiving you. So that is the one with the freedom from the misconception. Any questions? Okay.
chanju semje rinpoche ma jeba na geshe je jeba nyamba mewa ya kone kone tonye tawa rinpoche ma jeba na geshe je jeba nyamba mewa ya kone kone pama semje namje tena de je gendo tamje tato chanju sembo kano sushi ba tada goje gogo dhuje kare rabe gobe shima zuba na tawa ma doju chere zonga dinti jato je shaga sede ba do tenje je
May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline but increase forevermore. May the precious mind realizing emptiness not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline but increase forevermore. Due to all these merits, may all Father and Mother sentient beings have all happiness. And may all the lower realms be empty forever. Wherever there are Bodhisattvas, may all their prayers be accomplished immediately. In the sacred land surrounded by snow mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. More powerful transcendence and Gatsu, remain in this world until samsara.
Thank you very much, thank you. Today was a lot of noise there.